Welcome to Carolina Sculpture Studio. My name is Clint Button, and I'm a granite sculptor. And welcome to video number 132 of the Virtual Stone Carving Apprenticeship. All right, I've made some progress on the stone. Had some time, not as much as I'd like, but you know, it's sometimes you're growing up and things. There's other obligations between office stuff and everything else. So I'll just do a quick rundown of some of the stuff that I have accomplished since the last video. Strip some more stone off. Got one point I shot that's a little deeper than I'd like it to be, but it's not a problem. Remember 1 or 2 videos ago I talked about I was going to shoot points on drapery here beside or in front of her left thigh. And the drapery, in a nutshell, goes, you know, like this. You've got a hump, and then a hump, and then a hump. And between the humps, it kind of dips down in. Well, by shooting the point here, and I said I was just going to shoot and go straight across and then sink a little bit more and leave it long. You've got all this area in here that you're going to evacuate anyways. And so instead of hitting it right here, I got a lower. So I'm just going to shift that fold over a little bit and it'll just disappear into the stone. And you should know it. Now, that was because I got a compass that was a little out of measurement. The dimension was just a tiny bit off. And so my points didn't cross. And I got down a little bit and I'm like, these really shouldn't be moving like this. And I went and checked again and found out that I'd gone too much. So that does happen, even with experience, that does happen. And that's part of trying to stay focused on the work and not have a lot of distractions that take you out of the process. Swinging the compasses with, you know, mentioned with family obligations, this is really hard to do in short spurts. You need to be able to go into the studio for hours at a time and just clear your head and not come in and try to rush through a point, because you'll get off by literally the thickness of a pencil line and it could be significantly bad. So I shot a few more points. I also went through, because my studio is plein air, you just call it that, because I basically got open doors on one side. I'm pretty much where the temperature is where I'm at. And so we get some condensation on the stone depending on the humidity and temperature fluctuations. The stone can sweat. You also will have the grit from carving that bounces on the stone and you sweep it up and whatever. And so all your red lines will fatigue. They'll just disappear, your pencil lines. And so in order to keep them good, you go back on there once in a while with your straight edge, use your square, use your long straight edge and mark them very definitively so you know where you're at. You don't lose track of it. That way you can understand where everything is. We're to the point now, I'm getting up high. The top of the die is approximately right here. I'm not going to commit that until we get her put together and cut that arm, and that arm probably won't be done until after we at least start putting her head together with the clay model with our pointing machine. And so we could balance all this out so everything fits. But still, even with this, the volume here, we've got to go back another inch or so for the die and for the plinth. And that's going to project her drapery over the front and give us a chance to have any floral work. I think we're going to have a dogwood flower in our hand to project a little bit over the front of the die. That'll create a shadow. This hasn't come up in this project, but this would be an ideal situation to put raised letters on the face of this die, but that's not what the job requires at this point, because we're going to be taking that stone off. When we get to that point, it would be very easy. Remember I said the depth on this, from this shoulder to the tip of the blade, is 3/4 of an inch. And the depth on the big saw is 1.5 inches. It would be very easy to go through all these areas that are going to be pushed back and put a stripe every 1/2 inch, just stripe, stripe, stripe. it'll be really boring. It'll take you can easily spend hours doing that, and you'll get some sick of it. You go through 1 or 2 saw blades, but by putting all those stripes in and then pushing down with a 9-point straight down very carefully, you can lower that whole panel very effectively and very accurately. So when you go in to clean it up, everything's about the same height. Now, if you did that, you don't do it with a chisel. Push it off, because you'll have places that'll dig. You have to push the whole thing down, and you have to find where square is again, and that's not ideal. But it's coming along pretty well. I am going to. I had to rework the clay for the bust. They sent pictures, and then the bust fell apart because they didn't get to it and whatever. So I got the bust reworked. That's pretty well wrapped up, and I've got to do a mold and cast it, so I'll have to take some time to do that. Something you'll find with the silicone, if you buy the expensive, like the Silicon Industries, or I forget what it is, the GL1000, that's really nice to use, a 2-part silicone. That is, I don't know the exact right words. That's activated, that's designed to be poured en masse. You're supposed to fill up a container. Just say, for instance, we were going to make a mold for this. You'd put this in a box and pour that silicone in to fill it up, and it would cure all the way through, big, thick cross sections. Okay, if you did that same thing and used the hardware store silicone and poured that in there, I bet it'd stay wet inside there for years, because it's not designed to cure like that. It cures from the outside in, and it cures once it cures, it sort of creates a cocoon or protective layer. It requires humidity to cure. And so we're running into weather situations, and I wanted to bring this up so that y'all know about it. I've had projects in the past, it's winter time and you cure them and you think, well, I'm gonna take this, it's gonna be too cold for it to cure properly. Well, we did one in particular, and if you have silicone and it freezes, the tubes of silicone, GE Pure Silicone 1, that's what I always use. It's the only stuff I use in the tubes. And other stuff may work well, but that's what we were told works better than the other varieties, and I had no reason to second guess it. I'll just use what I know works. If that freezes, if you have it in a storage building or a studio like this one, where if it freezes, everything in the studio will freeze, it ruins it, and it'll never cure. It doesn't look any different. You'll just apply it, and 2 weeks later you scratch your head why this junk doesn't cure. It's because it froze at some point. So I keep my silicone in the house. Well, we were casting a project, doing a mold years ago, and it was, middle of the winter, it was cold, so I took it in the house where it'd be warm so it'd cure. I had it in the living room, I'm sure, I'm not the only person that's ever done that, taking the work inside the house. And it never cured. And we were pretty frustrated, and you strip it off and it's a mess, and you try to clean it all up and everything, and I got some fresh silicone from the hardware store, and it still wouldn't cure. Well, the problem is the hardware store silicone is activated by ambient moisture or humidity. You have water in the air, and that's what cures, that's what helps activate the silicone to cure. And we were heating with a wood stove. And so because the wood stove was running to keep it nice and warm, there was no humidity in the air. And so that silicone just wasn't drying. So I took it outside, it was cold, and it dried without any trouble. So depending on the environment you're in, if you're running into problems like that, and you may find out that it's based upon humidity. And if you're in a really dry environment, like maybe you're in the Southwest or something here in the United States, out in New Mexico or Arizona or something where it's really, really, really dry, you may have challenges with your silicone, and that you may have to put on a super thin cross sections, or even have some type of spritzing system to try to create some moisture so that it can cure. But you can't let your silicone freeze while it's in storage, or it'll ruin it. And when you do use it, you have to put it on in thin cross sections and multiple layers. And there has to be enough humidity in the air to let it cure. So when we get to casting this, it'll just be cold. The water, the cold air, cold temperatures, they don't hurt the plaster that much as long as it doesn't freeze. And it can actually slow down the pour a little bit because it's cooler. But we'll have to work around that and be able to do it. So I'm going to get back into carving, and we'll throw more on here when there's something different. I'm going to swing the compasses some. I've got a point up here. Her cuff we're right about across the base of her cuff. And this is still quite a bit long. Shoulder will be up here. You got to sink this over here, and I'm probably going to leave where her breast would be. I think it's a little low on the plaster. I'm going to raise it just a little bit, and then it's always easy to take it off later. So we can put the point machine on and have it indexed really the way we want it. So back to carving. I've had a couple of questions about this, and so I want to go over it real quick one more time to explain what I'm doing and how I'm doing it. Okay, this is the top of my isosceles triangle. Okay, and the way I was trained to draw this triangle, to lay it out, was to have a pair of set of parallel lines that were the distance of the job measurement apart. Okay, and then I took the same, and then we found the center point between those two parallel lines, and we put the model measurement, and we strike through each one of those parallel lines, and then we would connect across there, and that would be our triangle. That's how we laid it out. Now to me, that's too fiddly. Okay, what I do on my video to show you how to lay out the triangle without the parallel lines, I think works better. But when you're swinging on this triangle, you still have to strike, and then you have to find those two strikes with your compass, with your job compass, and capture it. And I don't know, maybe it's just me, maybe I'm just old, whatever. To me, it's a pain in the butt to try to find two strikes, okay? Because I got to find two things, and it slows me down. And so I decided to try it this other way that I wasn't trained. Let's see if I can show enough of the triangle. This triangle, this is the top up here where we just were, goes all the way down to the corner right here. Okay, so we're going to move over to the corner. I'm going to show you what I've been doing. Let's see if we can. Okay, this is the corner of our triangle. Now, we can create the same triangle the way I did it on the video. Take the model measurement, we just install the caliper in a certain distance, okay? And then we'll come over here and we'll put a big long strike. And then we have our known job dimension, and we put it here, and then we strike this. And wherever those two lines cross, that's where that's our triangle that we'd work from originally. And because this leg is the same, and this leg is the same, that creates another isosceles triangle. And this is what's known as a congruent triangle. This is the same as this big one. But this triangle has the same mathematical function if we use it this way as it does swinging from the top. So I'll take a model measurement, and I'll go in the corner of this triangle, and I'll mark it, and then I'll strike it. And then I only have to find one point on this bottom. So I can stick my compass back in where the strike was, and then go back over here to my origin point. And I only had to search for one point to get my job dimension to do the enlargement. And this is proven to be a lot faster. And I had a couple questions about that, and I wanted to go over it. The way I laid out the triangle when I drew it in the video, it was upside down to this. I had this line on the bottom. But it doesn't matter because your angles are the same. The way this strikes, and then over here, this angle is identical to the angle up here at the top, the apex angle on this isosceles. And so you can still get the same mathematical functions, the same relationships out of this triangle. And so that's what I've been doing. I've been swinging from the corner, start at my corner with my model measurement, come up here and swing it, and then swipe it along the bottom. And then I just go from that bottom point back to my origin, and I get my enlargement. And it's saving me time, and I like it a lot. Okay, back to carving. Yeah, I've mentioned this before. Just wanted to show you. You got to watch your tools. See if this will focus. You can see the big chip right there in the edge. See the chip? And so I'm always sharpening my tools pretty sharp, doing both rough out work and finish work. So I aired a little bit on the super sharp side on this one, and it chipped. So I got to go over to my grinder, dress them off. Now it's all back to looking good again. You got to get in the habit of watching your tools, because a chip like that will cause a lot bigger fracture of your carbide. If you don't see it, if you don't stop and see, I went right back, I'm pretty sharp. You know, that's a sharp tool. But I'm down here shooting points, and I'm knocking some stone out, and so I leaned on it just a little hard and chipped it. But if you don't see a fracture like that, just a little chip, and you push on it, you're apt to blow a great big piece of the carbide off and really lose a lot of tools. So pay attention all the time. And if you're on doing finish work, if you're scraping, you're doing a little finish work, and that chip is there, that failure, if you had a bigger failure, that could cost you a detail like the end of the nose or end of fingers or lips or something like that. So you got to watch for it. All right, back to work. I should mention that chip, I don't know that I've had more than maybe one other chip on my carbide doing this whole stone. That's just not, you know, you learn how to sharpen it because you'll adjust your angle. There's not a perfect angle for every, I mean, there probably is a perfect angle for every cut, but you're not going to be continuously sharpening and resharpening your tools. If you're getting a lot of chips, you're too steep. You need to make it more blunt. And if you're carving slow, you're doing detail work, you probably need to go back and get it more steep, because that blunt will slow your progress. You'll also ramp out where the bevel ends. If you're at a shallow angle, it'll tip to lift the cutting edge off the stone. But if you're getting a lot of chips, your stone, there's a few things to consider. Your carbide's too sharp, or your tool steel's too sharp. Your stone may be too hard. If you're using like we carve something like a jet black from India that I understand is more basalt and grant's really hard. A lot of Chinese stones are hard to use. Carbide just isn't worth it. You use grinders on it, diamond tools and saws. But for something like, if I was carving, if this was jet black, India jet black, I'd sharpen my tool and then I'd take a brick or a grinding stone, and I'd blunt the edge to round it off so it doesn't chip. And that way I can still carve very effectively. But if you sharpen your tools really sharp and the stone's really hard, it'll just break them all day long. So pay attention, read your tools, and learn how to make adjustments on the fly, and have your sharpening equipment just a step or two from your stone so you can keep going. Because when you're doing hard stone and sharpening a lot, you can't afford to drive across town to sharpen the tool. All right, back to work. Okay, take a look at this. Went ahead and shot her far nipple, and I stayed up. I put some clay on the model just to raise it, because she's a little less definition on the far side than on this side, right above her forearm, right here. And so this is a nipple, this is a nipple, and this is where we'll index the register of the point machine. These are foundation points. We got to treat those just like we treat this. We're not going to get on there at all. We're going to really mark them and protect them. Now, the nice thing is we've scaled her with an 8-inch head, okay, because she's 5'6", 5'7", and so her head's about 8 inches tall, and probably just a little bit over. If you measure between these, right across there, put it straight across, it's perfectly 8 inches, which is great. Going up, this should be 16 inches. It's not, it's a little bit over. It's a little bit taller, it's closer to 18, which isn't a problem. It's easier to have extra material. It's also a judgment call. When you start doing anatomy and you say that a figure is 8 heads tall, okay, just throw it out there. She's 8 heads tall. Well, that's great. Well, the very top of her head typically is, when you draw that, they're bald. And then you draw the hair on there if you draw the thing with 8 ovals standing up, or 7.5, whatever you do. And then you've usually got some volume for hair up on top. And making them longer or a little bit taller is usually less of a detriment than making them too short. Because when you make them stumpy, it just doesn't help. And unless you've got a very youthful figure, gravity always wins. And so as people age, some body parts tend to move down. So this is probably ideal, because we're about an inch below where they would be for, this isn't supposed to be a 15-year-old angel. This is supposed to be an adult. So I think we're in good shape, and we'll put this together and make this work. But we'll have to mark these really well and treat them as foundation points, because our pointing machine will go here and here, and then we'll have one more up here on top, and we'll put that in there, and everything should be great. So that's good progress. But we got a few, these are folds that are above her belt. This is where her belt will be. So this will all be concave. This will all go down in. So right now she looks really full, and she doesn't look like she's going to look once we trim this down, but this will come off back to here. This is the leading edge of the cuff right in here. So all this has got to come out. This has got to come out. We got to have material here for her hand, but her hand is part of the bust model. And so we'll cast this. We'll start working with the hand to make sure the hand is going to work good first before we do anything with the forearm, so she doesn't have rubber anatomy, walk anatomy. This has got to go way back. This is over here. We've got a couple of points. This one's on her shoulder here. This one's on the outside, and this one's on top here, these two, and that represents this one and this one. You can see these two. So see, there's still quite a bit up to go for her shoulder. So we've still got this much material to go in and take this off, to go up and then have her neck and her head and her hair and everything. So coming good. Okay, I went up and checked the video, see where we're at, and decided, wanted to go up there too and to measure for my measurements here. This is 8 inches side to, you know, between points. And I put a tick on the center line, measure the center line at the top, and that's 19 inches. That's perfect for my model. That's exactly where my model is. Her head's tipped, and it's tipped forward, and it's tipped to the side a little bit for her to be looking sort of to her right. And so, and I've got her hair done somewhat like the pictures that the family sent. It's not going to be just smooth hair because her hair was more curly. So trying to get that, you know, not match, but that close as well. And so that all adds height, because when you take that oval and you rotate it forward, it pushes the chin down and it picks up the back of the head and it makes the head look longer. And so then you get into your, basically your 9 and 9 instead of your 8 and 8 if you're measuring that way. So we're in great shape, and I'll have plenty of room for the chassis. I probably will put a metal chassis on the plaster as a surround, and then you can put really nice points, put it right where you want it to be. And if you need to do any adjustment or any movement, you don't spend all your time digging on the model, because if you do a big cape, you know, big bust, and you go way down to the bottom of the ridge cape, it's extra work, extra money, extra materials. And if they're not paying for it specifically, then you need to understand how to get past that. And so instead, we'll start it down, and then I can hang a chassis, mount it wherever I want, and get it just right. And that's what we'll do here. And so then after we get that, this point is really tight to our arm. And it's not that tight on the model. We should be able to get all of that straightened out and make it really nice. And I'm looking forward to it, because I'll tell you, if you want to point and you want to swing compasses, you know, when you're swinging and everything's going great, it's really cool. I don't want to, you sort of go into a different mindset because you're just doing your thing. But when if you don't have the time to do it, it can get really frustrating, because it's slow and it's really monotonous. And so, you know, you're always looking to find a balance between, especially if you're not doing it for somebody else. If you're not pointing something up for a customer so that they can take and carve it, and they need to have it put together really well so they can understand where things are because they don't know how to point it up. That's different. All I need is some landmarks. I need to get some basic structure together, some basic points where I can, you know, effectively put a straight edge between 2 points and know that it crowns or it's concave or how it smooths off, and then we'll just carve it, because it's, you know, we don't point the vast majority of jobs because the jobs just they're not paying for it. You know, when we do a 4-foot niche with, you know, a figure that's, you know, 3'9" or 3'10" or something in a niche, you just look at it and just cut it. And you need to understand where things are and how they work and how they orient, so that you can do a good job. I mean, the iris and hummingbird is a great example. You know, that's a really complex, complicated composition. I just looked at it, drew a few lines on the stone and carved it. Go back and look at the video. You know, that job's so complicated, I haven't even had time to slow down and focus and do a rubber mold of it, because doing a mold's going to be a real pain. It isn't fun. You know, and you're doing it just to have something to hang on the wall that you're never going to make any money on. So I'll spend, you know, I don't know, a couple $100 or at least to do a mold of it, to hang it up. I might as well nail $200 or $300 bills to the wall and just leave them there. You know, what's it going to do for me? So when you start pointing stuff yourself, there's a break even as to how much is justified and how much isn't. When I start pointing this portrait face, I'll shoot a lot of points, but I can hang a point machine on, cut a hole, put a point in it, and go over 1/8 of an inch and do another one and just wrap the whole thing and go really fast because it's very organized. This there's more to it than that, and so it isn't always justified. But it's coming along, and we'll get her all put together, and I'm trying to bring up the order because I want you all to think about how things are done. You know, this is all great and important. These are foundation points. I don't want to carve her face first, but I want to get her organized so that we can know where she is, and then make a decision if we're going to just stand her up and put the face on it. But the problem with putting the head together too much, we really need to put this together. And pointing her hand makes a lot of sense to me, okay? And pointing her shoulders and her neck, this whole area in here, makes a lot of sense to me. And get her body organized so that she's all together, because if we don't have this in the right spatial place, if she's tipped too far forward, it looks like she's falling off the stone. You don't want that. You want to look like she's well balanced. So we've got to get all of this put together, and some of that'll have to be done standing up. And but once you start carving it, when you just direct carving, you're just going, and it's I don't say it's more fun, but it's easier to keep your head on straight, especially when you've got landmarks to know that this is where the leg is and where the leg isn't and where the arm is and isn't, because this is still high, this is still long. I've got a lot of room to twist this forearm a little bit just to make that hand look very, very reposed and relaxed, so that it doesn't look like her hand is at some weird cockeyed angle, okay? So, anyways, my name's Clint Button. I'm a granite sculptor here at Carolina Sculpture Studio with the Virtual Stone Carving Apprenticeship. Thanks for coming in.